Well, hello.
Hi, Thomas.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. I can. And I
Great.
think everybody else can hear us too. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of our influencer series brought to you by Workplace AI. Today, we have an amazing guest. We have Vun Lai-Dumone. Did I get that right?
You got it right. I was listening very closely.
Nice. And who is the founder and CEO of Work Smart Advantage, which she founded almost 10 years ago now. Wow. Van is also an accomplished speaker, doing many keynote speeches, including a TEDx talk titled "What If? The Life-Changing Power of Curiosity." And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit. She is also an accomplished author, having written the successful "What If Pigs Can Fly," available on Amazon. Well, welcome, Van.
Thank you very much. I'm really appreciative of being here. I'm going to start sharing my screen and talking about this topic we're going to be sharing today,
Oh, before you
which
do,
is,
before you do,
yeah,
can I ask you a question? And you
of
may have
course.
we're going to do this anyway, I imagine, but nonetheless, I have to ask you what the talk on TEDx was about and how it's become the cornerstone of your beliefs and really everything you do.
Sure. And I'm going to share in the presentation. There's the
Oh, are you?
story.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to just do it then, or I can do it now?
Whenever you feel
I'll throw it in the presentation, and then I'll
such an
refer to the
amazing
TEDx talk so you
story.
know what Thomas is talking about.
Okay.
How about
Okay.
that?
That will be
Okay.
great.
Okay, great. Any other questions before I get started?
Not yet, but I'll pepper you
Okay,
as we go.
awesome. Okay, so Thomas and I met on LinkedIn about a month ago. He asked me to come do this. I was very happy to because I really love sharing this concept of creativity, creative leadership, creative problem solving. And the topic today is the future of leadership is creative. And I really want to hone in on why this is. And I want to start with a exercise. So I know I can't see the people on LinkedIn, and I'd like you to either type in the chat or just think for yourself. Maybe you can scream out in your house the word roar when you see the hidden tiger. I'm just going to leave this up for a couple seconds here. So when you see the hidden tiger, type into chat on LinkedIn or here and just type in the word roar when you see the hidden tiger. And I am going to do the reveal. Here it is. The hidden tiger is not that big giant tiger sitting in the middle of your screen. It's written in words right inside the tiger. So I share this because now that you see it, you're never going to be able to unsee it. And what I want to relate it to is that this is how creative leaders think. They make uncommon connections and see things from different perspectives. And when you can do that, you're able to solve challenges in new and novel ways. So I don't really need to do a big introduction. Thomas already introduced me, but what I do in corporations, I help corporations leverage novel thinking and creative techniques to inspire fresh perspectives and innovation. I often do it through leadership training, team development programming. So why creativity? So number one, whether you believe you are or not, we're all innately creative. And that creativity allows us to see things from different perspectives. And once we see things from different perspectives, that creativity has the capacity to transform challenges into opportunities. And when you think about that, when you have a challenge, you really can't solve it through the same mindset where the challenge came from. You have to get creative and think differently to be able to really find opportunities in those challenges. And what does creativity mean? So we're not talking about artistic talent, right? Like not all of us are going to be opera singers. Not all of us are going to be painters. But here's what we could all do. We can all have the ability to generate novel and useful ideas, solutions, services, and products. So creativity, for what we're going to use it for today, is a thinking tool. And here I am. Just you don't know me other than Thomas has vouched for me, but I share creativity, and it's not just me that thinks creativity is important. This is a study from Harvard Business School. And it says that there's many, but here are 4 benefits of creativity in business. Number one, it encourages innovation. And if you can think about any company that doesn't need innovation, reach out to me. I'd love to hear their story. Creativity boosts productivity. It allows people to do more because, again, you're tapping into something that's natural to all of us. It allows for adaptability, and allows and fosters growth of individuals and of groups and companies. So that's Harvard Business School. Now, according to a McKinsey study, 77% of senior company leaders recognize creativity as a vital driver for business growth. 77%. And that we're talking about company leaders. Now let's look at how employees look at creativity. So the value of creativity for employees, 85% agree that creative thinking is critical for problem solving in their career. And 32% don't feel comfortable thinking creatively in their career, and 78% wish they had more creative ability. And that comes from Adobe Creativity and Education study called Why It Matters. All right, another slide here. So pulling this all together. So creativity is ranked from Deloitte's Insight studies, the World Economic Forum, shows that creative thinking is a core skill for workers, rated only under analytical thinking. But look at that gap. The purple represents. Oh, hello. Oh,
Sorry about that.
The purple represents the how the value of creative thinking. But look at the estimated average skill set. While the core skill ability in terms of importance is upwards of 56%, the ability is around 6%. So there's truly a gap to be filled there. And that's the work I do. I work with people, individuals, organizations to fill that gap between the value of creative thinking and the actual skill that we currently have. So now let's look at the characteristics of a creative leader. So how do creative leaders think? Because everything first is about mindset. So the mindset of a creative leaders, they are curious. They are adaptable. They allow for experimentation and failure. Creative leaders understand that process is as important as results. They're not just chasing the results. They understand that how we get there is just as important. They're comfortable with uncertainty, and they can see things differently, just like that tiger exercise we did in the beginning. They believe in collaboration and that all ideas matter. So ultimately, what creative leaders believe is that they understand that good ideas can come from any level of the organization. And they know how to unlock those ideas, because there's a difference between understanding that good ideas come from all levels of an organization, and then also the skills and the actions that make it so that people can actually share their ideas in a way that is comfortable for everyone, that gets all the ideas on the table so the best idea can make it to the finish line. And why creative leadership? So here are some of the benefits of creative leadership. It improves engagement from everyone on the team. And that's what we're looking for, right? More engagement, more connection. It boosts engagement and team performance. You build trust and psychological safety, which I'll touch on a little bit more in just a bit here. It drives independent thinking and innovative thinking, and enhances problem-solving skills. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're here on this call, who cannot benefit from this, right? Is there anyone here that says like, oh no, we don't need any more of this in our organization. We don't need to boost engagement. We don't need to develop trust and psychological safety. So truly, the benefits of creative leadership are of value to everybody in business. So because Thomas did bring up my TEDx story, and he also, he asked me to share it today. So I'm putting it into the slides here. So I want to share this story for a couple of reasons, because it's a creative leadership story. It is also Women's History Month. So it's a story that I think that talks in Women's History Month. And then also it really just shares this concept of what can we accomplish if we take on these characteristics of creative leadership. So, and then one other thing, like this is the 50th anniversary, the year of this story. So this story goes way back to April 29th, 1975, the day before the fall of Saigon. So my family and I, we are Vietnamese refugees, and we came to this country on this date, April 29th, 1975, at the fall of Saigon. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the South Vietnamese Air Force, and he had to get us out of that country as soon as he can and in any way possible. So we were aided out of the country by the US military. And our first home was, as you see here, at Camp Pendleton Marine Base in San Diego. And after a couple of months of living at Camp Pendleton, we were transferred to a refugee integration center up in Northern California called Hope Village. And it's here at Hope Village that hundreds of now civilian volunteers came to help us in our transition. And one of those volunteers happened to be Hollywood movie star Tippi Hedren. Some of you may know who she is. She's most famously known for her role in Alfred Hitchcock's movie The Birds. And Tippi came to this camp and was like, how can I help? So they said to her, well, why don't you help these women find a career in their new country? So Tippi had this amazing idea. And as the leader of this group of women, she decided she would start a typing and sewing class. So she brought in typewriters and a teacher. She brought in sewing machines and a teacher, and she set this whole program up. And 20 women signed up, including my mom. And as they were typing, as they were sewing, they were curious and fascinated about something completely different than typing and sewing. They were fascinated by Tippi's long red manicured nails, which you can just make out slightly in this picture here. So imagine being Tippi Hedren, a famous movie star, I'm sure very busy. You know, she had set up this whole program for them already, typing and sewing program. And yet she still paused and paid attention to that curiosity. And as Thomas mentioned, this is the story that inspired my book. How do we pay attention? How do we pause and pay attention to those curiosities that tap us on the shoulder? So Tippi paused, paid attention to those curiosities, and she asked, like, what if, how might we? How might we have these women become licensed manicurists? What if they could be? Which led her to her first small step, which was asking her local manicurists from LA to come up to Sacramento and Hope Village and teach the women how to do a basic manicure. Dusty Kusputera said yes, and she came up weekend after weekend and taught my mom and her friends how to do a basic manicure. But that didn't make them manicurists. So the next step that opened up for them was, well, what if we go and ask the beauty school if we can enroll these 20 women? There were challenges. They didn't speak English. They had no money to pay tuition, but they went anyway, despite those challenges. So they went down, and Tippi asked the owners of Citrus Heights Beauty College, we have these 20 women, they don't speak English, they don't have money to pay tuition. Is there any way we can enroll them in your school so they can learn how to be licensed manicurists? The owners of Citrus Heights Beauty College said yes. So then day after day for 10 weeks and 400 hours of schooling, my mom and her friends went down and learned how to be manicurists. And they all passed their manicure practicum and written tests in English, leading them to become the first 20 licensed Vietnamese manicurists in the United States. Now, if you live in the United States, you know that the story does not end there. The Vietnamese refugees and immigrants who came after us followed their own curiosities and started, providing, like, creating their own beauty schools, they're manufacturing their own beauty supplies, opening up their own salons. And it's now an $8.3 billion industry. But it really stemmed from creative leadership, Tippi's creative leadership. So if you think about the mindset that Tippi had, she was curious and she allowed for curiosity. She was adaptable. Again, she set up all these, can you imagine having set up all the sewing machines, typewriters, bringing in instructors, but she still was able to pivot and adapt. She allowed for experimentation and failure. She tried one thing, bring up her manicurist, wasn't a failure, but she led her to the next thing. She was collaborative. She was comfortable with uncertainty, and she believed that all ideas matter. Again, she could have ignored their curiosity. So what that led to was my mom and her friends being able to create a life for themselves and their families, allowing me to be here with you today. And it created the possibility for thousands of Vietnamese refugees and immigrants after them to find this career so they can do the same. And like I said, it's now an $8.3 billion industry, all because of that mindset of creative leadership. Now, I'm not saying that everyone here today is going to start an $8.3 billion industry, but I do ask, what possibilities might you be able to create when you take on that mindset and then the tools of creative leadership? And what I want to do now is just give just 1 minute here for you to give yourself a score between 0 to 5 for each category, each characteristic of creative leadership. Are you a creative leader? And being honest with yourself here, I don't want you to think about how I would rate myself, but think about, at work, what would that person say to me? What would my peers say about me? What would the person who works for me say about me? Would they say I'm curious? Would they say I'm collaborative? Would they say I'm comfortable with ambiguity? So again, just take a second here. Give yourself a range from 0 to 5. So I'm not going to ask for anyone to share or say anything here, but I just want to share this with you just so we can have a baseline of where each of us are right now. And when you look at this, I want you to remember that we all have the capacity for creativity and we all have the ability to become creative leaders. And it's not like I didn't write up here, are you a great financial planner? Right. And because that takes training, that takes time to become a great financial planner. But look at the characteristics of a creative leader. You can be curious right now. You can become more collaborative right when you get back to the workplace here. You can be more adaptable in the moment. So all these things you can accomplish today. So our ability to become more creative and more of a creative leader can happen pretty quickly. And a couple things I want to share is that we just mentioned it. We all have the capacity to learn the skills of creative leadership. And it doesn't take a course. It can happen today, just the mindset shift. And the other thing I want to share is, I talk about creative leadership. And I am very well aware that the mindset of creative leadership, the tools I'm about to share with you, are not for every occasion, not for every situation. But creative leadership is a leadership tool and mindset and skill set that you should have in your toolbox so you can draw on it when the timing is right. So let's spend the rest of our time talking about some tools of a creative leader. So the first one is really more of a principle of creative leadership. And it's two parts. It's this tool and this principle of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. So oftentimes people look at this as just brainstorming, but there's a difference. So let's say you're in a meeting and you want to get everyone's ideas on the table. And what you do is you get in there as a leader and you say, here's the challenge. Who has an idea? And some brave soul raises their hand and gives an idea. What generally happens to the idea is that it is vetted. Vetted right away, whether it's in a positive way or a negative way. No, but, yes, and. So idea is vetted. And then we go on to the next idea, and then we vet that idea. And we go on to the next idea, and we vet that idea. But here's what's happening. Number one, you're not getting all ideas on the table because there are people there, like I used to be, who just sit back and we don't share ideas because we're afraid that all our ideas are bad. We are not going to make any sense. So we don't share it all. And the other thing is when you put out an idea, when you gift your team an idea and it's vetted right away, that's judgment. And there's a level, very subconsciously, level of trust is lost when there's judgment of your ideas right away. So this concept of divergent thinking is that all ideas make it to the table. There's no judgment of ideas, and wild and crazy ideas are welcome. So as a leader, you would prompt with the question and you generate solutions with the rule or the criteria that there's no judgment of any of the ideas. We're going to let all ideas sit on the table. An example I often give, which works in any situation, you should try it, is whatever the challenge is, I say, well, I think we can solve this challenge by giving everyone a adopted puppy, right? And let that sit on the table because you never know what that wild and crazy idea could lead to. And I don't care how you put those ideas on the table. It can be on Post-it notes. It could be on a giant whiteboard. One of the processes I use is called Lego Serious Play. So we actually build our ideas out of Lego and we let them all sit on the table. So that is divergent thinking. All ideas make the table. There's no judgment of ideas, and wild and crazy ideas are welcome. Only after all ideas have made it to the table through divergent thinking tools, which I'll show you in a minute, then you move on to what we call convergent thinking. And in convergent thinking, now you're going to set some parameters and criteria, and you're going to narrow down your ideas. So you have your generate ideas, and you're going to filter to a single idea using parameters. So in this conversation, in this workplace table, you might now say, okay, great. All these amazing ideas are now on the table, and we have to meet this budget. It has to happen within this timeline. It has to include these groups of people. Whatever those parameters are for you, now you can look at all the beautiful, amazing, wild, crazy ideas on the table and say, which ones or which combination of these can we move across that filter and start narrowing down until we have one to select from. This process of divergent and convergent thinking, what it does, it allows all ideas to the table and the best idea to make it to the finish line. And when you have the idea of the finish line, what you've done, you've drawn everyone's attention with you because you've also allowed everyone's ideas to come to the table without judgment. So you've built trust, you've built psychological safety. It's really just a small switch from a brainstorming session, but that small change of separating divergent thinking from convergent thinking can make such a difference in how your team operates together and how people feel more comfortable sharing ideas because they can trust that their ideas matter and they'll at least make it to the table without judgment. So one way to remember this, an exercise I like to do is hands in the air. So this is divergent thinking, drawing in as many ideas as you possibly can. So that's divergent thinking. And this is convergent thinking. Give yourself a hug. You're narrowing down to one idea. So again, divergent thinking, convergent thinking. Now, I can't really see people, but if you email me later and let me know if you can do both simultaneously and effectively, right? And I guarantee I'm not going to get any emails because you can't. It's not physically possible. And I share that because when you talk about divergent and convergent thinking, they are separate. You have to diverge before you converge if you truly want to brainstorm and innovate and solve challenges effectively. So that is one of the core principles of creative problem solving and creative leadership. And I want to share now some tools for you that you can bring back to the workplace and utilize this so you can practice this concept of thinking creatively, getting ideas from everyone, and using novel techniques. And the first one is called visual connections. I have these 4 images here. You can use any 4 images out of a magazine, pull them from the internet, whatever it is. But when you meet with your team and you are trying to overcome a challenge, vet an opportunity, rather than sitting there and looking at each other and trying to come up with ideas, pull out some images and then ask the question. The question I put in here as an example today is, what characteristics of these images reflect a way that I might apply a mindset of creative leadership at work? So those are the characteristics below. So I personally might look at that tree and say, all those tree branches remind me that I should reach out and be more curious about other people's ideas, right? The slides remind me that I can be more comfortable with uncertainty and just slide, just go with it. Because guess what? That's a soft landing. So again, this is just one tool that you can use back at work to help people uncover subconscious ideas. Because here's the thing with people, and when you ask them a question, everyone has one idea. Whether they're telling you or not, everyone has one idea. So what we want to do as a creative leader is give people multiple ways, that they can share the idea. So you're going to touch on someone's comfort level to share ideas with some of these tools. You're not going to get all the ideas if you just sit there and ask people, here's the question, here's the challenge, here's the opportunity, who has a solution? You might get, and I'm sure in your head as I say this, you already know who they are. You might get those 2 people who always have the answers, and then the rest of the people who say nothing, right? So these are tools that you can use to get these other people to share more who may not share if you just ask the question and ask them to give the answer out loud. So this tool is called Visual Connections. And the next tool, I'll do the next tool here, is called The Worst Idea Ever. And I just posted it. If you follow me on LinkedIn, or if you will follow me on LinkedIn, look at my post from today because I did a video about this today. So this worst idea ever exercise is identifying the challenge or opportunity you want to share or you want to give solutions for. And rather than saying, here's the challenge, who has an idea? Why don't you switch it up and say, here's the challenge or the opportunity. Give me the worst idea ever that you can come up with to solve for this challenge. And see how much fun people have. And I love this exercise because here's what is overcoming. It's overcoming fear. And I had a lot of fear, like working in the corporate environment or working for anyone. I just had this fear of authority, right? So when someone in an authority figure would ask a question, I would freeze up. I'm going to be the last one to speak. And by the time I'm ready to share my idea, oh, someone else has said it. Or no one said it. And then my idea just stays with me and it never gets shared. So this worst idea ever exercise really allows people to have fun first, lighten the mood, lighten the atmosphere so that people feel comfortable sharing their idea. And then what you're going to do is you're going to say, these are some great worst ideas. Now let's think about the opposite of that worst idea. What's the opposite? What are some opposites of that worst idea that we can actually use to apply to solve for this challenge? And I always like to tell people the more difficult of a topic it is, or like a hard topic to speak about, whatever it might be. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, this is a serious topic. We can't use these tools. I'm telling you, like, that is when you should be using these tools. When you're dealing with a really rough topic where you don't think people will participate in giving you the answers, these are great tools to use because now you're tapping into people's creativity, you're tapping into people's subconscious behaviors and ideas, and they're more willing to share when you make it playful and fun. So this second one I want to share with you is called the worst idea ever. And again, the reasoning behind it is that you want people to be comfortable sharing their ideas first. And the more ways you can do that, the better ideas will make it to the table. All right. The last one I'm going to share with you today is called perspective shift. So as human beings, we kind of see like this, right? Tunnel vision, I see from my own perspective, and it's hard, especially in a busy work environment, to look at other perspectives and see things from a wide view. So this is an exercise that allows ourselves to step into a different shoes, different perspectives to find creative solutions to a challenge. So I'm just going to ask you right now just to think about your own challenge. I'm not going to give you a challenge for this one. Write down a challenge you're currently facing. And we won't do the exercise here together, but what I will ask you to do is come back to this. Maybe take a screenshot right now and come back to this and do this later. So thinking of your challenge, look at these three perspectives and ask yourself, how might I look at this challenge from the perspective of a pigeon looking at it at a 50,000 foot view, whatever it might be? How would I look at this challenge from the perspective of a CEO? How might I look at this challenge and how might I solve for this challenge if I'm brand new? So I did this recently for a HR group, and one of the challenges, like, well, how do we onboard? How do we make or close that gap between the hierarchy of the C-suite and new hires and people who don't usually get access to them? And they looked at it from the perspective of someone looked at it from the perspective of I'm a new hire. So if I'm a new hire, like, oh, well, why don't we create like a mentorship program, or why don't we do lunch and learns, or when someone from the C-suite comes down and shares their perspective with us, or shares their story with us from when they were our age. So lots of ideas can come from this if you're able to see things from different perspectives. So that is those are the three tools I want to share with you today: the divergent and convergent thinking, the concept of using images to gather ideas from other people, the worst idea ever, and perspective shift. These are three tools creative leaders use to generate ideas from more people and get more perspectives around a problem, a solution, a challenge, vet an opportunity from their teams. All right, so we're almost done here. Okay, so this slide, I'm just going to remind you because some of you may be like, ooh, this is exciting. I'm going to go back and try this today, right? I'm going to go back and apply these tools. What generally happens is people come to these programs I run, they learn these tools, and there's an excitement. There's an excitement of bringing them back to the workplace, bringing these tools back to the workplace. And you go back to the workplace and you start, right? You share the perspective shift tool. And what generally happens is that excitement becomes this chaos, this mess. This mess of like that person says they don't get it. This person says it's taking too long. I'm not sure what I'm doing. I've never done this before. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that some form of creative chaos is going to happen in your life as you start to apply these tools. It may not be a big form of chaos, but it's going to be something. It might be a mindset. It might be self-doubt. And what happens sometimes is that people get to that creative chaos and they said, you know what, this is not working. So I'm just going to make a U-turn and do things the way I've always done them. What I'm telling you today, and what I'd like you to remember from this program, is that when you try something new, when you try these creative tools, when you move towards becoming a creative leader, you will face creative chaos at some point. And remember this slide when you face creative chaos, what I'm saying right now. You will 100% of the time face creative chaos. Do not make that U-turn. Keep going because that chaos starts unwinding and becomes easier, becomes part of your process. And what's on the other side of that creative chaos is more innovation, better ideas, better relationships and connection on your teams because you've built trust and psychological safety where all ideas matter. So you will eventually get to the point where people are sharing their ideas with you freely and openly. So you really, truly are a culture of learning and innovation. And I always like to share this slide at the end. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And that's Henry Ford. So do things differently. A lot of times I will come into companies and their challenge is the fact that they're stagnant or, we've always done it this way. So we're always going to do it this way. It's worked for us so far. But is that good enough? Right? We really want to, even though it's good enough so far, this concept of creative leadership really expands a company culture to one that values people's ideas. And I have worked in, a lot of these companies where you walk in and it's so much fun. I love walking to organizations like that. Like, oh, look at that open kitchen where I can eat anything I want. There's a pinball table. There's a basketball court. That is all wonderful. And I always call those plus ones. That is not what's going to keep your people loyal and loyal to you, loyal to the company. Because innately what people want is their voice to matter, their ideas to be heard, and they want to be able to contribute and have meaning. So through creative leadership, the mindset of creative leadership, the tools of creative leadership, that's what you are giving people. So thank you so much for being here, participating today. I hope you did take some screenshots so you can try these practices even later today. This is how you can reach me, connect with me on LinkedIn. And the program I do is usually on creative leadership programs. I do a lot of interactive keynotes and team development workshops. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Thomas, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That was amazing. Hey, I've got some questions though.
Yes.
So when you're trying to get people to contribute, because to me, that's always the bigger challenge. So, I mean, I think everybody agrees in general, right? That creativity is the key to creating all the opportunities that can come from it. Although not everybody knows what it is relative to what they're doing or the company they're with. But how do you get them to start to contribute? Do you just with fun workshops? How do you do that?
You mean so you're talking to me as a facilitator or within a company?
Both. I mean, you're a
Okay.
facilitator working for the company, yes?
That's right. So I will go. I mean, this is workshops like this, like teaching people the value of creativity, the value of number one, the value of all ideas matter, right? Like, and people. I mean, even when I say it on here, I'm sure Thomas, you, and other people are like, oh yeah, that's right. When I have meetings, like not everyone contributes. We all face that. Not everyone contributes because they don't feel comfortable contributing. So it's just slowly integrating these tools to make have people feel more comfortable. I don't think people don't want to contribute, right? It's not a lack of desire to contribute, but there's so many things going on with people. Even though I can speak in front of a bunch of people, I get really nervous when I'm in a small group and someone asks me a question. So rather than asking a question and looking around and just saying, hey, how would we solve this? What about playing music for 10 minutes, saying, hey, write down your ideas, right, for 3 minutes and then pass them to the next person so they can add to it. So that by the time you're actually sharing them aloud, you don't know whose ideas came from who. So it's just all these tools and frameworks that really allow for creativity to be part of the process and with the ultimate goal of all ideas make it to the table. And it really is just an introduction of it. I think we talked about the fact that I work with this organization called the Honor Foundation, Navy SEALs, right? And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to present this to Navy SEALs. Like, this is not going to go well. But once, when I did it and it went successfully well, I realized like, oh, this works for everybody. Because again, we're all innately creative. When you give people an opportunity to share their creativity, to use their creativity, it really is embraced.
Yeah, I guess when I hear the conversation, I mean, obviously it's great, but I think of the old days, if you will, and maybe for some companies it's still current, where they got the idea box sitting on the wall somewhere, with the idea that people can contribute to the idea box, and if there's nothing in it, I
Mm-hmm.
guess has any ideas. So, do you recommend that organizations have a monthly creativity meeting or discussion within their departments or within their areas in terms of the ideas they have for improvement, et cetera? Or what sort of format do you utilize with respect to that going forward?
So the tools I teach, what I would love to see is that creative leadership starts at the top, right? All the leaders of company understand the role of creative leadership. They have the tools, and then it just trickles down. So any meeting you walk into, right, as a fly on the wall, oh my gosh, they just use perspective shift. Wow, they just use the worst idea ever. So my goal is to give people, leaders, teams these tools to get all ideas on the table. My suggestion, as you said, is like I actually made this suggestion to a client just not so long ago. If they're going to implement it, then this works. If not, then that's the whole thing. Like all these things you teach, I teach, it's in the implementation. You have to put it into action for it to actually work. So I actually suggested an idea box for this client because I do know they will implement. So any idea, like how would you change, what I asked them to do is at the beginning of the month, write down on top of the idea box the idea. How might we? Right? How might we improve the culture for new hires here? How might we improve our relationship with clients? Whatever your how might we question is, write that on top of the idea box, allow people to share their ideas in the idea box, but then it can't just sit there, right? At some point, you got to pick out some ideas from the idea box and say, okay, great. This time we're going to bring in lunch and we're going to go into the conference room and we're going to explore the ideas and we're going to see use some of these creative problem solving tools to actually put them into action. That part I cannot control, right? And I'm sure you see this too, is we can give the tools, we can share the insights, and unless people are putting into action, nothing's going to change. And I would be happy to have a company bring me in once a month to do ideation. I think that would be so much fun.
Sure, sure. Well, question for you in that regard. How many of these meetings do you feel like, in general, are virtual versus on-site or in person or some combination of the above?
I mean, it just depends on the organization. I knew a lot of companies are going back to in person, but during the pandemic, I was teaching this a lot of like these as virtual tools, which I also think, I mean, when you think about the tools I taught, They all can be done. I mean, we just did it virtually, right? So, um, so it just depends on the organization. I right now am doing for me. I'm mostly doing in person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you feel like the companies after the fact are doing that as well in continuation, or just taking your key points and doing that, or are they evaluating their ongoing meetings in some way? And I'm asking for a reason. I'm going in a certain direction here, by the way.
Got it. So I'm not, so I don't, I'm just going to say a blanket. I don't know other than when they come back to me. Right. And I do have a
Oh,
lot of people that come back to me and it's one of those things where I teach so many different tools. And what I will have companies or teams or people come back to me is like, oh, that divergent convergent thing, we use that all the time. Or that one, the the connections with the images, we use that one all the time, right? but and that for me is sort of um the the most I've gotten back from people. But again, like it's one of those things where it's like this is not something new I teach, but it is something where what I think the value of it is if so let me go way back from when I started my business. I was laughed out of rooms like, oh, you are going to do what? You're going to teach me creativity? Like, there's no value of creativity in the workplace. What are you talking about? And so what I had to do is I had to teach the value of creativity in the workplace before I taught what I taught. And I feel like that's where I am now in this process too, is this idea of getting enough traction within an organization that people are using it throughout the organization. And that just takes time, right? I mean, thank goodness I'm committed to the work I do because it really is like knocking on a lot of doors and saying like, okay, so I'm going to teach you these tools, but unless we follow up with, you know, other programs or unless you assign someone in your organization to head this up, to advocate for this, it really isn't going to go anywhere.
yeah, I guess where I was going to go with it. So in working with many clients as I do, because I'm similar in some ways to yourself with respect to this, I find that it's a mix. So even when they do have folks in the office, they still have some outside of the office. So often it's a hybrid type of format, or they're just doing online meetings with certain teams here and there in order to put it up, or they've got different branch offices or whatever the case may be. But I still find that a lot of the meetings are video based type of meetings. And where they're doing that, there's actually an opportunity to gamify what we're talking about and to actually gauge and measure how often people are able to have fun and contribute and really create some of these crazy ideas and follow those signals that you were talking about to see what area they're taking advantage of, whether it's the worst idea or
Mm.
something, and you can gauge that, and then you can actually start to teach people because meeting over meeting, they start to learn as we contribute, we're getting better results, and you can certify and you can score, and there's lots of ways to do that and build your methodology and these right into a format that stays with them long after that session that you've done, but then continues the next time you come and do a session and say, you guys have really improved in the last month or the last 2 months. You've hit all these points. Let's take it from there, and so on. So that might, and of course, I'm speaking about our platform, Workplace AI, because it does all that. But the
Uh-huh.
point is that's a great thing that might be built in. It seems to me gamifying
Yes.
what you're doing would be huge, I think.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, well, we'll have to talk more about that, Thomas.
It's
Because
just
when because as you can see, I'm more of a hands-on tactile Lego and
sure.
crayons type of woman.
Sure.
So all this
That's
AI stuff, I'm gonna have to depend on you to help build out.
well, I'm here to help. I'm
Thank
here
you.
to help, you know. And these tools, everything that you're doing starts to create data points. And the more of those
Mhm.
data points you create, the more we can track and the more we can see how we're doing against the goals that you've set on the basis of your methodology. So there's such an amazing opportunity there. I love what you're doing. And I think creativity is so important. And to me, it's what brings people to life. It brings that
Absolutely.
enthusiasm and joy to what they're doing when they're able to be creative in their jobs. And when they're not creative, I think they turn off.
At 100%. That's what happened to me. My personal story is I was working for an organization and zero creativity, right? Zero ability to bring my full self there, my creativity, my curiosity. And I was fortunate that I was able to leave, right? My husband had a full-time job, and I was able to leave and start this with this concept like bring creativity. And when I first started, it was like, I just want to be literally bring creativity in the workplace. Let's do team and leadership development, and then like let's make rocks, and let's make let's make these little cubes and all sorts of like hands-on creative things. But it was in doing this work that I found that the value of creativity is what we share today, right? That it allows people for all ideas to matter. They become more themselves. They're able to, since we all are all innately creative, people really come alive when you allow them to be creative at work. um,
100%.
and for me, it was like, okay, well, that's what I'm doing. Is like for people who can't leave, I want them to feel alive and creative in the work they're doing.
Right. Right. Well, Van, it's been a great session. I've learned a ton, and I'm sure everybody else has. I want to really thank you for taking the time today. This has been wonderful. And I think that I don't know, is there an opportunity with respect to the presentation to make that available? We can do it as a follow-up post,
Yeah,
if you will.
absolutely. And I think this is recorded, so they can have that too. But if you want to do like
Sure.
a PDF or something, I can create something like that for you for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to do a follow-up post that really spoke to it and maybe take some snippets of what you were talking about, especially those key three items,
Yes.
and then put this with it. And I think this is a takeaway that every organization can really grow and benefit by. And your ability to bring that forward, I think is just amazing.
Well, thanks, Thomas. I appreciate you reaching out and for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time. I hope everybody has a great day and feel very comfortable. How best should people reach you, Van?
LinkedIn, like I'm always on
Sure.
LinkedIn. I had shared my slide there. And then also, you can always email me. People, I don't know if you get this, Thomas, but people see people speak. They're like, oh, like I'm not gonna email them. They never respond. Like I always respond to everybody. So it's Van at worksmartadvantage.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you once again for your time, and thank you, everybody. Everybody have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.